Hello students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello everybody and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today we're going to continue our American government series by looking at citizenship and civil rights. Don't forget that there's a link for a fill-in-the-blank worksheet in the description. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize for any mispronunciations ahead of time. I do my best. In the United States, most people are citizens simply by popping out on American soil, thanks to a rule called jus soli, or as I like to call it, congrats, you were born here. And if you're born abroad to American parents, no worries, jus sanguinis has your back. It's basically a my parents are American, so I'm American deal. For those who didn't get their U.S. citizenship by birth, there's a thing called naturalization, where you jump through legal hoops until the U.S. finally says, all right, you're one of us now. The states, they have no say in this. But if you decide you've had enough of bald eagles and apple pie, you can ditch your citizenship through a process called expatriation. Just don't get it twisted. Marrying an American doesn't automatically hand you a citizenship card. On the immigrant front, there was a time when the U.S. rolled out the welcome mat for newcomers. Then in 1882, Congress was like, okay, that's enough, and kicked things off with the Chinese Exclusion Act. Fast forward to the early 1900s, and Congress was all about assigning quotas, like a bizarre immigration version of you get a ticket, you don't for different countries. They even revamped this system several times before scrapping the whole country-based quota thing in 1965. Now about 675,000 folks get to move in each year, according to the Immigration Act of 1990. But not everyone arrives with an official invite. Some sneak in, and if they're caught, it's a one-way ticket out via deportation. Congress keeps tweaking immigration laws, and ever since, the U.S. has been locked in an endless argument about how to handle the whole situation. Because what's more American than a good old heated debate? The United States is basically a giant cultural salad, full of different ingredients, all tossed together. Since the 1960s, the recipes changed a lot, with more and more African, Asian, and Hispanic Americans being added to the mix, thanks to immigrants coming in as permanent residents. Historically, though, white Americans weren't exactly great at sharing the salad bowl with non-white Americans. African Americans, Native Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans are four big groups that have been on the receiving end of discrimination, whether from the government or just regular folks. African Americans in particular have been dealing with this nonsense since the colonial days. Talk about a long-standing bad habit. Native Americans, same deal. Many still live on reservations, which are basically government-designated land patches where the U.S. went, here, this is yours now, sorry about everything else. Hispanic Americans are now the largest minority group, and a lot of them have come from Central and South America seeking refuge. Meanwhile, Asian Americans have also faced their share of discrimination, which makes blending into the white-dominated crowd, aka assimilation, about as easy as fitting a square peg into a round hole. And let's not forget women. They're technically not a minority group, but they've had their fair share of discrimination too. Property rights, education, jobs. Let's just say for a long time, the U.S. wasn't rolling out the red carpet for gender equality. The Equal Protection Clause from the 14th Amendment is like the U.S. saying, hey, everyone deserves a fair shot under the law. But of course, the government still needs some room to be picky. For example, treating kids differently from adults. They can do this, but it should still make sense and not just be arbitrary. When it comes to making sure laws don't play favorites, the Supreme Court uses the rational basis test, which is basically a does this make sense test. But when it's a big deal, like messing with fundamental rights or treating people differently based on race or gender, the court ups the ante with the strict scrutiny test. This is more like a prove your case with a megaphone test, demanding a really good reason for any distinctions. Back in the day, many states loved segregation like a bad fashion trend, passing Jim Crow laws to keep African Americans and whites apart. In 1896, the Supreme Court was like, sure, separate but equal sounds good, but that turned out to be a bit of a farce. By 1954, the court threw out that idea for schools with Brown v. Board of Education, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 said no more federal funds for segregation shenanigans. By 1970, legal segregation was out of schools, but de facto segregation, segregation by default like an unsavory leftover from a bad meal, still lingered, thanks to housing patterns. Gender inequality had its own rough patches, but since 1971, courts have been playing referee and challenging most laws that treat men and women unequally. And even though gay and lesbian rights have made progress since the 1970s, discrimination based on sexual orientation is still hanging around like an unwanted guest. From the 1870s to the late 1950s, Congress was pretty much on a civil rights vacation. But come the 1960s, it decided to get back to work. One of its major accomplishments was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which basically said, hey, everyone, regardless of race, religion, or where you're from, can chill in hotels and restaurants without being kicked out. It also put its foot down on discrimination at work and in any federal-funded program, covering everything from disabilities to age to gender. In 1968, the Civil Rights Act took a stab at housing discrimination, making sure you couldn't be turned away from buying or renting a home based on the same old biases. Then in 1972, Title IX threw a spotlight on gender equality in education, extending the 1964 Act's protections to the classroom. On top of that, the 1960s saw the birth of affirmative action, which is like a job market remedial course, forcing employers to make their hiring and promotions reflect the diversity of their locale and fix any pay discrepancies. It's a bit like making sure everyone gets a turn on the playground, with quotas ensuring certain groups aren't left out. Of course, not everyone's a fan. Some folks gripe that affirmative action is reverse discrimination, or discriminating against the majority group. This has sparked ongoing debates in the Supreme Court, state legislatures, and the voting booths, making it one of those never-ending arguments like pineapple on pizza. Okay, let's do some recap. In the US, becoming a citizen is often as simple as being born here, thanks to jus soli, or having American parents abroad, thanks to jus sanguinis. If you're not a citizen by birth, you can go through naturalization, which is a legal obstacle course. You can also opt out of citizenship if you're done with the American dream, but marrying an American won't do the trick. Immigration laws have seen their share of twists and turns, from the welcome mat era to the restrictive quotas and the current system that allows about 675,000 people to move in each year. Historically, America's been a mixed salad of cultures, but has struggled with discrimination against African, Native, Hispanic, and Asian Americans, along with women. The Equal Protection Clause aims to give everyone a fair shot, but the Supreme Court still uses tests like does this make sense and prove it with a megaphone for tougher cases. Segregation laws once ruled, but were overturned by landmark decisions and acts, while affirmative action, meant to ensure fair job opportunities, continues to spark debate like pineapple on pizza. There you have it, folks. That's citizenship and civil rights nutshelled. Thanks for watching Nutshelled History. Go nuts on those like and subscribe buttons and say something nice about other people in the comments down below. See y'all next time on Nutshelled History.